sports cars have always been the automotive beauty standard, with their swooping, low-profile lines and innovative designs. However, between their higher cost of maintenance and low parts availability, many auto enthusiasts think twice about owning these Italian beauties. But Alejandro Detomaso came up with a solution to that problem and combined the stunning Italian design with the power and performance of a Ford drivetrain. Alejandro Detomaso founded the company in 1959, and their first few cars were all various kind of prototypes and racing cars. It wasn't until 1963 that he came out with his first production street model. And many people think that the very first Detomaso was the Mangusta, but it was actually a car called the Vallelunga, and it was a 4-cylinder Cortina Ford power plant. Kind of an interesting little car that didn't catch on super fast. So it was actually the Mangusta that brought the Detomaso to the masses. And that was introduced in 1966. And it was quite a success. So after that came the Pantera in 1971. And it is the most produced of the Detomaso, with about 7,000 units produced. As I've mentioned before, part of the reason I love the classic cars so much is the histories behind them. And Detomaso definitely has a very interesting history to it. Currently, you might have seen the new Detomaso, the P72. It's a very retro styled car. It's really cool if you haven't seen it. But back in the day, after the Vallelunga, Detomaso tried a collaboration with Shelby, and they were going to create the P70. That collaboration fell apart. Detomaso created the Mangusta, and the name Mangusta actually means mongoose, and it's supposed to, be a small, vicious animal that eats cobras. It's widely thought that that name was meant to be aimed at Shelby and his cobras. So I love that little bit of history there. And then the Pantera name, it actually is Italian for panther. Maybe not quite as confusing as Ferrari's naming systems, but definitely just as fun. The Detomaso names all have very unique and important meanings to them. One of the things that has made these cars so popular is the 351 Cleveland engine. So because it's a Ford engine, not only does it have the power and performance that people want, but also it's easy to work on, and finding parts is not difficult. On many of the Italian cars that I sell, the parts can be very hard to find. Even simple parts that you wouldn't imagine would be difficult are sometimes near impossible to find. And if you do find them, they're quite expensive. Having the Ford engine in this car has made it so accessible to so many more people, because even if you're not a do-it-yourself kind of mechanic, there's no lack of shops in the US that can work on a Ford engine. And if you are the kind of do-it-yourself garage mechanic, then you can find the parts anywhere and you can work on it. There's plenty of space in the engine bay to be able to get to the different components and reach stuff. It's a very user-friendly car in the sense of working on it and in the sense of driving it. It does have a lot of power. The clutch can be a little heavy and it's very powerful, but it's not hard to drive, and it's definitely not hard to work on yourself if that's what you want to do. The Pantera was first released to the public in 1970, and journalists loved the car. They even said that it made the Corvette look quite tame in comparison. This Pantera is a 1973 model, and they had changed from their initial Pantera to the Pantera L, which stood for luxury, or actually it was Lusso, which in Italian means luxury. And there's a lot of little tiny differences between the initial Pantera and the L model, but the easiest way to visually just look at a Pantera and tell the difference is the front of the car. So Originally, Panteras had these little chrome bumpers on each side, but because of ever-changing EPA and DOT laws in the early to mid-70s, the DOT required big rubber bumpers. So the Pantera was changed in the L model to this big rubber bumper. And then also, I want to point out one more little fun fact. So when you look at the emblem here, it has a really cool history to it. So even though Detomaso was founded in Modena, Italy, and it's an Italian car brand with an American power plant, it actually, the founder, Alejandro Detomaso, was born and raised in Argentina. So the blue and white in the emblem actually comes from the Argentina flag. And then the T that you see in the emblem, it doesn't stand for the de Tomaso. It actually is from the Alejandro Detomaso's ancestors when they were cattle ranchers, and that is the brand that they used on their cattle. So this is a very historic to Alejandro Detomaso emblem that he used on his cars. Another one of the visual differences they did with the L model Panteras was the dash layout. The gauges are angled a bit towards the driver, and it's one whole piece of the dash instead of kind of gauge pods like in the earlier models. But they made a lot of non-visual improvements as well. So one of those is the air conditioning in this car functions much better than the previous model, and also the car's cooling system. So on the initial Pantera, the cooling system was one of the weak points in the car, but with the L model, they made improvements so that the cooling system functioned a lot better. When you sit in the car, it's quite interesting. A lot of Italian car manufacturers have offset pedals, and if it's not something you're used to, it's kind of odd when you first sit down into the car. It's something I've been used to for a long time, and as a new driver to offset pedals, it doesn't take a lot of getting used to. It's just that initial first kind of sit down and go, oh, everything's a little bit to the right. But the good news is this car does have a lot of leg room. I'm not very tall, I'm only 5'7", but I do have a decent amount of space, head space, and lots of leg space. So I feel like somebody a lot taller than me would be able to fit in here without too much problem. Ever since I sold my first Pantera about 10 years ago, I have always been in love with these cars. In my opinion, they're that amazing combination of the Italian beauty, the Ford power plant, and the ease of maintenance, pretty much everything I could want in a sports car. While I still don't own one, having the pleasure of driving these cars has always been just one of the many perks of the job. The history behind the Detomaso brand is yet another thing that has always attracted me to these cars. So I hope this video has taught you a little something new about the Pantera and Detomaso in general. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and stay tuned because we got a lot more coming very soon.